When you were a child, there was no way for you to know that the tricky, fleeting love of a narcissist parent wasn't real love. And what happens to people who were emotionally or physically abandoned by the people who were supposed to raise them, who were supposed to help them learn how to navigate the world, how to detect what's even true and what's not, those very people, they lied to you. You may have gotten a very broken thought process out of it. Maybe you have no red flag detector. Someone might be able to manipulate you and use you, and you would have no way to tell the difference between that and someone who is really there for you and right for you. And the good news is, it's never too late to start healing that damage to your emotions and your perception. Now, I have a letter here from a woman I'll call Sylvia, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm 36. I grew up with a highly narcissistic father who also was really immature, slammed doors when he was annoyed, and was highly unavailable emotionally. I suffered a lot, as did my mother, but she didn't find the power to leave him. My father also mostly refused to go on holidays with me and my mom. He claimed he just didn't feel like spending his time with us. He had several girlfriends, which I was aware of already at a very small age. I think I was 5 or 6 when I confronted him and told him I wished he would stay with us rather than visit other women. So here I am now, an adult. I now find myself falling in love with a colleague with whom I've had a platonic friendship for some time. He's married, but he told me when we got together that his marriage is over and he wants to be with me. I'm taking out the fairy pencil here, a very famous pencil. It makes a sound, and this is the sound of me circling something I want to come back to. I'm going to read the letter all the way through so we can just kind of hear what Sylvia has to say. Then we'll go back through and I'll see if I can help her. Okay. I felt very close to this man, closer than I ever have to anyone, ever before. I had moments when I thought it was like heaven to be held, to feel protected. I had a strong feeling that the little girl in me finally got what she desperately was begging for years. Well, as you might have guessed, none of it was true. A little while into our relationship, I found out his marriage was not over at all. In fact, his wife didn't even know there was a crisis. When I confronted him, he refused to answer my calls. He didn't show up to a meeting with me. He sent just a short text message that sorry, he couldn't make it. I was heartbroken. I fell so deep. I can't remember falling that deep in love before. At work, he acted like he didn't even know me. And I froze. Even now, I feel like I'm underwater, that I haven't been able to breathe for nearly a year. I can see that he's not the person I thought he was when I fell in love with him. But still, why did I feel so connected? Why did we have those amazing, intimate moments? I never felt so close to anyone before. Now my question, how do I get out of this terrible nightmare? Sylvia. Okay, Sylvia, I'm coming to help. I'm so sorry this happened to you. This is so much like a normal thing to happen to somebody who was raised by parents like the ones you describe, where your father couldn't be bothered. He didn't treat you like a real child of his. He didn't treat your mother like a real wife. He was off with girlfriends. He didn't want to hang out, and he slammed doors when he was annoyed. You know, when he didn't get his way, right? And not available emotionally. You know, here's my theory. We're not trying to match what happened to us, but we can end up sort of going into a semi-conscious state when we get near a person who is similar to the parent who hurt us so much. Also, if you didn't get loved properly as a little girl, your capacity to be aware of red flags and to see when trouble is coming your way, it gets very restricted. That's my experience of it. And from reading letters from so many of you and working with so many coaching clients, I'll just tell you, that's what happens. We have a constricted ability to see. And where healing happens is when you can recognize it for what it is. You can forgive yourself 100%. It is not your fault. It's not your fault that you were damaged by a cruel parent like this. You didn't bring that on yourself. What you're demonstrating here is a pattern that is common for people who were treated that way. So what I'm really saying is you're normal. But what's happening right now is terribly destructive to you, to him, to his wife. And yes, it totally needs to stop. So it sounds like the actual affair has stopped. It's your attention on the affair that stopped. So let's keep going. Let me see what else. So now you find yourself falling in love with a colleague, and you say falling in love. It sounds like you've been in love for a while, actually, with whom you had a platonic relationship for a while. Then it turned romantic and sexual, I guess. He is married, but he told you when you got together that the marriage is over and he wants to be with me. Okay, so right there, I'm going to help you change your perception. Whenever anybody tells you, I am married, but the marriage is over, you'll know it's over because they're not married. Somebody whose marriage is over is not married, they are divorced. And when they are divorced is the beginning of when you can begin to think of them as free. And I mean legally divorced, the papers are done, it truly is over. They live in a separate house. They're no longer emotionally entangled with the person. And you know, people, when they get divorced, there's sometimes a lot of layers to pass through. There's a lot of emotional entanglement. So even when they're separated, even when the paperwork's all done and they're officially legally divorced, there can be a lot of, maybe a jealous ex, or maybe they're co-parenting a child, and so there has to be a very cooperative relationship with that person. But the marriage needs to be over to be over. So that's one thing. When a parent has manipulated you into thinking like, oh, I can see other people, I have these girlfriends and I don't feel like hanging out with you, but I'm your dad. That just primes you to be able to think that somebody can say, well, I'm still with my wife and living with my wife, but it's over. And there's this part of you that can crap fit that. If you know my word crap fit, it's like this incredible superpower that those of us traumatized as kids have to fit ourselves to crap. When we were little, it was a survival mechanism. You must fit yourself to crap when you're a kid, or you won't eat, or nobody will take care of you. So you learn to tolerate what you're given, and your mind fills in the holes with justifications, rationalizations. You see love where there's actually like a big loveless zone looming. And then that keeps your spirits intact. But then you come into adulthood, and if those behaviors start happening towards a partner, and especially when your perception has been damaged and you find yourself with somebody who's not available, crap fitting will cause you to stay in and be in love with and pine for somebody who has treated you like crap. All right? So, which is what's going on here. This guy's treated you very, very badly. And it's especially bad behavior because you work together. When you work with somebody, it's such a big deal if people who work together are going to date, because even under great circumstances, there's a very high likelihood the relationship will end, and then what happens on the job? Hardly anybody can get through having a falling in love experience, or even just a sexual experience with somebody, and then be able to see them all the time and be okay. And a person needs to be safe and feel good on the job. So a mistake on both of your parts here. And it's a mistake that many people have made before, but it's a mistake that needs to be cleared up. So he lied. He told you he was married, but it was over and it wasn't. And that his wife, this poor wife, she had no idea. I mean, according to her, like, what? There's a problem in our marriage? She doesn't know. So it was purely a lie. And then you felt closer to him than you'd ever felt. And this is the thing. This is limerence, all right? Limerence is when you can project this incredible, great love on something that's really just like a little scrap. It's barely anything. And it's like, oh, this is the most important connection. I'm not making fun of it. It's really, really common for people like us. And so that's what it was. It's a phenomenon. It's a side effect of being traumatized, that we're capable. It's the same thing you probably did with your dad, because a little girl needs to believe in the love of her dad. Right? He wasn't giving it to you, but for your formation as a person, as a girl, as a woman, you had to somehow construct that love, that fatherly love, and now you've learned to do it too well, and that needs to be undone. You need to not be good at doing this to the men in your life today. You need to not paper over when they treat you badly and be like, no, it's really love. This is not love. So this feeling you have, it's a natural feeling, but it just goes to show how powerful our instinct to attach and love. It's such a powerful instinct that we will give it even when the thing in front of us is not suitable. And that's what's happening. It will never give you back what you want. It's going to always be a source of pain. And this funny thing happens where you just keep loving it anyway. We're going to treat that as a mechanical problem, all right? As a problem for you to solve through taking action and steps. So I'll list those in a minute. All right. So you felt like that little girl in you who never got loved finally got what she desperately was begging for years. And she actually got the exact same thing. Not what you were begging for, but the same old crap. So that is sad. I feel really sad about that. But I'm actually happy because when it all blows up in your face, it finally becomes possible to start facing what the damage was of the past. Now, I would much rather you were never hurt in the first place. But given that you were hurt, given that your perception was damaged, then I'm glad that it's now come to your attention that your perception has been unreliable. Because if that never happened, you'd just still be marching off that cliff, of giving all that beautiful, romantic marriage energy, possibly family-making energy, to a ghost, to nothing, to a scarecrow. Just giving it to nothing. So, nope, not giving it there anymore. You're saving that for real love, for a real person who shows up in due time, who wants exactly that with you, who sees you. And you can heal to the point that you can recognize that and give your love in equal measure to somebody who gives that to you. But that's not what just happened to you. You just got a hard lesson about living with trauma and what can happen. So you said, so yeah, it wasn't true. When you confronted him and said, wait a minute, you're still married, he wouldn't answer your calls. That is so disrespectful. Oh, I don't like him for that. He wouldn't even answer your calls. It's like you didn't exist. It reminds me of your dad. These people who act like your dad are few and far between, and somehow this one's gotten in, and I'm going to help you get him out. He didn't even show up to a meeting with you when you were going to talk about it. He owed it to you to talk about it. But you know what? When somebody's treated you that bad, if you had asked me beforehand, should I meet with him? I'd say no. Cut off all contact. He said he was sorry he couldn't make it. And then at work, he acted like he didn't even know you. And you know what? He doesn't even know you. He doesn't even know you. He was having an affair with some projection of whatever he wants. And he was not seeing you, the human being. If he cared about you and loved you, he would never, ever do this to you and put you through this. You who's been through so much, to put you through this abandonment and this like being used, basically. He would never have done that. So a bad person got in. He's out. He's out now. So now you have the problem. You feel frozen and underwater. I know that feeling. You're in a trauma flight there. And you can come back from it. It's time to come back to Earth. It's safe to come back when you can make it safe to come back, and you can start to come out. Some people describe it as feeling like they have a membrane over them, but it's basically going into a fog where we're not quite experiencing life because right now we're finding it too painful. We don't know how to cope with it. But that's what my courses are all about, and starting with the free course I teach, the daily practice. This is a place where you can begin to put those harsh feelings that you have towards others and mostly towards yourself about this, of any sort of shame and blame that you have, what it means that this happened, what your future might hold. There's so much fear and resentment that we end up with as a result of being treated this way. Also, just because we're human, like all humans have fear and resentment, but you've just been through one of life's unkind experiences. And so there's a way that you can get this out and start to have some freedom and peace in your mind. And with a little bit of peace in your mind, you will then develop some confidence that you can have peace in your mind anytime you need it. And when you know that you can have peace anytime you need it, it'll become safe to take the membrane off, to come up from under the water where you've been sort of like going into a little egg of safety. You just needed to be safe, all right? But you can make yourself safe even in the world. Now, as for this guy still working with you, that is really hard. And he's the offender here, and I wish there was some magic rule where you could make the offender leave the job, but that may not be the case, all right? That's seldom the case, and it's really a choice that you have to make about whether you want to be there anymore. And I'll tell you that if it were me, I would go ahead and get out of there. I would find it no matter how much I knew and understood and could tell myself that guy was poison, I don't want anything to do with him, seeing him was always going to it would always remind me of that small part of myself that felt like I should put up with being treated that way, that felt like I should put on blinders and not see what was going on, that felt like somehow I was responsible when I was unconscious. I was responsible when I was a kid. All that stuff gets activated, and it's nicer for healing. It's not 100% necessary, but it sure helps if you can get away from the person who hurt you. So that's always a thing. I think it might be empowering to change jobs as well. And I understand that there are some circumstances where that's very impractical or impossible, or you can't possibly do it right now, but I'm going to just challenge you. Don't talk yourself out of changing jobs by sort of pretending that it's necessary if the subconscious motive is really that you just want to keep being around him and hope that maybe he'll come around. What I'm going to encourage you to do is to cut off all possibility of return, no matter what he says, no matter what he does, accept in your mind there will never again be any contact with you. Just cut it off. And I recommend that even when somebody is an ex and they haven't been cruel or abusive, but just that to become emotionally available, you stop having a relationship with them. You stop having a connection. Don't try to be just friends. Don't try to get closure. It's not closure. It would be a reopening. You're halfway towards closure right now. The rest of closure is you don't ever see him again. That's the rest of closure. There's nothing more to say. He was a jerk, and I don't believe that he's someone capable of telling you anything that's going to help you. And I promise you, even really wonderful people, once they've hurt you like that, anything they say is going to open up old wounds. Even if it's kind, even if it's considered, it's going to open up old wounds. So I encourage you to just, put a wall over that memory and be gone. Just be gone. Have a new life. Have a new life. And then one thing you can try, you can take my dating course. I teach a lot there to define what you need, what you really, really want in a relationship. And one of the things would be somebody who is not involved with an ex or has a wife, right? You might want to write that down with 100 other things that are really important to you in a relationship. And when you have that as a reference, then when you think maybe love might be blossoming with somebody, you can consult your list of what's really important and get real with yourself. Do I know that this marriage is over if somebody pulls that on you? And recognize that you have a weak spot. Recognize that you might have a little blind spot. With CPTSD, we have blind spots. And sometimes we need to have workarounds and guardrails to help us navigate that thing. For me, I had this terrible blind spot. Like so many people in my family were drug addicts and alcoholics. When I was dating, I often couldn't tell right off the bat that somebody was an addict. And twice I ended up in a relationship with somebody who was an addict. One of them was not using when we got together, but then was. And it was all very confusing to me. It was weird. My mind just shut off around it. I couldn't see. I looked back and I was like, well, it was obvious, but I couldn't see it because I have a really good blind spot for that helped me survive as a kid. It's really better if I'm not around people who are actively using drugs, who are actively in alcoholic drinking. It's better if I'm not around it. It has a weird power over my mind. And so that went on my list. Now, some people, they wouldn't have to have such a strict rule as I made for myself on my list before I met my husband. They might have a more relaxed thing on that particular thing, but they might have something else. They might have some other rule about something that they know is a blind spot for them. For you, it's not knowing if somebody is actually available. So one of the guardrails you can set up for yourself is that you need to date for a pretty long time before you attach to that person. And how you do that is you don't have sex with them. You don't talk about it. You don't make out. You date and you get to know them, and you get to know them well enough that you can have frank and honest conversations about what's going on in their life, what are they looking for in a relationship, what are any complications they might have. And if they tell you that they're not married, one thing that's a good, just in case, since somebody has lied to you in that area before, I would say don't proceed in dating somebody until you've actually been to their home, until you've met their friends, until you have gotten some verification, not necessarily like a detective gets verification, but just through experience of the person. So a lot of the people who write to me with this sort of problem, what has happened is they've gotten very involved sexually, they've fallen in love, but they don't actually know where the person lives. They felt that they didn't have permission to have the conversation about, so, to say something like, I'm looking for a committed relationship, or I'm looking for marriage. I would like to have children one day, or I wouldn't like to have children one day. That you can have that conversation very early in dating. Maybe not on the first date, but maybe on the first date. If you're doing online dating, I would say that kind of thing needs to be in the profile. And you put that out there. And you lose your shame about what you want in life, and you get to own what you want. Like, you wanting real love is totally good and noble and holy. And everyone in the world wants you to have that. So for you to have that, it's time to put up a barrier so that you don't get emotionally involved or sexually involved with people who are not that. That just consumes your time and grinds you down emotionally. So that's the art to it. When I say it right, it sounds simple, but I know it's easier said than done. But that's why I recommend so heartily that you find friends who support you in this. Do you have friends who hold the same values and who have the same goals? People you can call and say, this guy rejected me. I feel like texting him. I want to see if I can talk him into seeing me again. And, they can say, no, don't do that. Remember, you don't want to do that. That's a good kind of friend to have. A lot of people in my coaching program and in my courses, they provide that to each other. I used to really underestimate how much we need other people to be able to change our thinking. It was relationships with other people where the injury happened. And it's in relationship with other people where we're going to practice our new strengths and our new boundaries and be able to have a new kind of relationship. So I hope that helps you. If anybody watching this feels like your trauma in childhood affected your ability to have a healthy relationship now, you might want to take my dating quiz. It is it's on the free tools page of my website. There's a link to that page in the description section right below this video. And you'll find a whole number of quizzes there. And if you open up that description section, you'll see all my courses. You may find something there that's really helpful to you. There's a free course there called The Daily Practice. That's the one I'm always talking about. If you need something like right now to start feeling better, this is the foundation of everything I teach of how to start getting free of the fearful and resentful thoughts that have you stuck and feeling unable to perceive. It starts to come off in layers when you can get this stuff on paper. So if you love this topic about how to set the bar higher for yourself so that you no longer accept crumbs in relationship, but instead you receive real love, I've got one of my videos lined up right here for you, and I will see you very soon.